All right, so I guess we're going to get started. I just wanted to give you a little warning at the beginning. Apparently, I didn't take enough insulin with my lunch, so if you hear a really loud beep, you can ignore it. It's not a big deal, I promise. All right. Before we get started with our actual community forum, I do want to thank everyone for coming, and I am going to start off with a few housekeeping items. We want to apologize for the late notice regarding the shift to a virtual meeting format. This change will enable more community partners to participate. Thank you for your understanding and flexibility. We appreciate everyone joining the meeting today. There may be a lot of questions to address, and while we may not get to all of them during this session, please know that responses will be provided afterward. In order to get through the presentation more effectively, we have muted everyone's microphones and ask that you type your question into chat. For this meeting, as there is a lot to cover, we will focus on providing education and solutions that can be addressed at a later time if necessary. Thank you for your understanding and patience. I want to emphasize that any messages containing profanities or personal attacks will not be tolerated and will not be responded to. This is to ensure a respectful and productive discussion for everyone involved. If any participant continues to be disruptive despite this warning, we will have to remove them from the meeting to maintain a constructive environment. Thank you for your cooperation and understanding. And I'm going to have Johanny give a message. So just in case we have any Spanish speakers out there, we do have the ability to translate questions.
Si durante la presentación los participantes necesitan clarificación o tienen preguntas, pueden escribir sus preguntas en el chat, enviar sus preguntas al correo electrónico de nuestra división a chefs@pima.gov o llamar a nuestra oficina al 520-724-7908 para proveerles asistencia. Gracias.
All right, thank you for that. So we want to let everyone know that hopefully if anyone has questions, they're more than welcome to put those into chat. All right, so let's move on. Today we're going to talk about temporary events, farmers markets, and mobile food units. My name is Brenda Catterman, and I am our mobile team supervisor. I have been with the county for about 6 years, and I've spent a lot of time on our mobile food team handling temporary events and farmers markets and mobile food units. Some of you may remember me from inspections. After I did inspections for a few years, and I transferred to our training area where I was able to train multiple inspectors. And now I have been our mobile food team supervisor for about 2.5 years. So I do want to welcome you today, and I'm glad that you were able to make it. Our session today is going to have 3 little sections. First, we're going to start out talking about temporary events, and then we will move to farmers markets and cottage food. And then finally, we will follow up with our mobile food units. All right. All right, so this is our purpose. So the purpose of the Consumer Health and Food Safety Division is to protect public health and safety by preventing foodborne, waterborne, and vector-borne illnesses through education, partnership, collaboration, and regulation. So we really do try to educate as much as possible, and we want to work with you. We want to ensure that the food can be served safely no matter how you're serving it. So that's our goal with this today, is to kind of work with you and provide that education and hopefully answer some questions you might have. Before we really dig deep into it, I'm going to let everyone know about this free food handlers course. While we do not require the food handler's certificate for temporary events, it is a really good thing for at least some of the people operating that booth, or at least leading that booth, that they may understand the food safety and how to handle it safely. Um, and it is offered through SaveSurf. And if you were to, you could send an email to us at chfs@pima.gov, letting us know you're interested in this food handler course. And please, in the body of the email, put your full name and your email address, and we will send you a code for that. That code will actually come through ServeSafe, so you'll want to look for that email. And the nice thing about this is it's offered online, and it's offered in English, Spanish, and Chinese for anyone who would like to do that. This is a good thing, especially for those food truck owners out there, because the state of Arizona, with their Title IX administrative code, it is now required that anyone operating or working on a food truck have a food handler's card. So it is free. Please reach out, and we are happy to help you get that. All right, we're going to start off with temporary food. What is a temporary food establishment? This is a food establishment that operates for a period of no more than 14 consecutive days. And that's a definition straight from the FDA. When we are inspecting these temporary booths, they do fall under the regulation of the 2013 FDA Food Code, along with our Pima County temporary food code. Here in Pima County, we do have 3 types of temporary food establishment permits. It comes with just what I was just talking about, a regular temporary permit. It is good for 1 to 14 continuous days of operation at one location. It is inspected at least once during the operation. We try to do that inspection on the first day towards the beginning of your operation. A seasonal permit, it's a seasonal temporary permit. It's good for 15 to 120 continuous days of operation at one location. So this is not expecting you to work every day for that 120 days. This is more usually for 1 day a week or weekends, that type of thing. Many people who use this permit are doing farmers markets or sporting events like Little League or high school ball, those types of things. These are inspected at least once, usually again the first day towards the beginning of that operation, and then sometimes twice during that season. And then our annual event concessionaires, which we call a 1700A permit, it is good for a year. It does require a special hand washing sink. And then they would receive inspections at least twice a year. And then something of note, any of these booths could be inspected more often than what I am saying. Maybe if we go and things aren't great and we're having to work through a lot of things, then we might come back and provide another inspection. Or during a season, we could very easily come back. There's lots of reasons why we might conduct another inspection, but you just never know when we might show up and provide that extra education. All right, so then we go to, does my group need a permit? So there's a lot of reasons that you might need a permit. So the question, serving food outside of its package, even chips, if you are opening them and adding stuff to them, you're going to need an extra permit. Any open food is going to need a permit. Does the food need to be kept hot or cold? This would be anything from ice cream or sandwiches or pizza or you name it. If it has to be kept cold for safety for any reason, then yes, you're going to need a permit. All right, and then mixing drinks, do you need a permit? If you are adding ice, which is considered a food, or if you're putting limes or cherries or you name it inside those drinks, if you're mixing lemonade, whatever it is, if you are mixing or adding ice, then yes, you do need a permit. The only time you may not need a permit is if you are serving Prepackaged, non-temperature controlled foods like chips, candy, cookies, anything that you're not having to open, or if you're just pouring, like wine, beer, beverages, things you're not going to add ice to. If you are just pouring, then you may not need a permit. All right, our permit application has gone completely online. We are no longer accepting any paper copies of applications. You can find that application on Pima County Health Department, Consumer Health and Food Safety, and then you're going to go to that permitting and inspections. As you see here, if you scroll down to step 2, you will find fill out the appropriate application. And right there we have our temporary food permit application. And that would be good for your temporary and seasonal. If for some reason you are choosing an annual, that's something you would need to call in and talk to us and we can walk you through that. Something of note that you'll want to remember, it is best to apply for your permits at least 14 days before the start date. If you are applying, you can apply closer to the start date, but if that happens, you are going to be charged a significant late fee. And sometimes those late fees are actually more costly than the actual permit themselves. So when at all possible, I strongly encourage you to make sure you're applying at least that 14 days out. And that is making sure that the application gets to us at least 14 days before. So with that process, you're going to follow that link, you're going to fill it all out, you're going to apply for that permit. That is just an application. That is not the actual permit. After you do that, we are going to input everything into our database where we need to put it, and then you will receive another email from us stating we are then ready to collect your payment. So then you will need to call or come in to make those payments, and then we will show up, like I said, hopefully the first day of your event, towards the beginning of your event. We will provide that inspection. We will walk you through if anything needs to be fixed, and then you will receive the actual permit after you pass that inspection. All right, we love our volunteers. We really do. They mean well, but you know, there's always some concerns when it comes to that. Some of the concerns that we have had, nobody wants to be in charge. We show up for the inspection and nobody wants to take charge and walk us through and help us know what's happening. They don't know what's going on. So when you have a temporary booth, please make sure you have someone that knows what to do and what's happening, when the food was prepared, all those significant questions that we may ask. Someone needs to be in charge. Oftentimes they are not trained in food safety. That's one reason I was suggesting the food handlers, especially since it's free, it walks them through that food safety. As long as at least a few people have that training, then they can share it with the others in the booth. But walking them through and explaining to them, it'll go much smoother for you and your booth and for us if people understand food safety at least a little bit. Oftentimes these volunteers are not aware of health department rules and regulations. So we will walk them through it, but it's a little bit easier if they kind of know the process before we get there. Oftentimes there'll be too many workers in one area. A temporary food booth tends to be a very small area. And if you get too many people in there, it's going to be difficult to wash hands and even prepare food. You're going to be bumping into each other and it just makes things a little bit more difficult. Something to keep in mind, single-use gloves are not a replacement for hand washing, and neither is hand sanitizer. That's not going to work. You got to actually wash those hands with soap and water, dry them with paper towels. If you haven't washed your hands before you touch your gloves, then you're contaminating your gloves. And so then their use is really not working the way you intend them to do. So we need to wash those hands and then put those gloves on. And then something to keep in mind, our cell phones. We all have them. It's a natural habit to pick them up and use them. Just make sure if you are using your cell phone that you are discarding old gloves, washing your hands, putting on new gloves. Our cell phones carry an awful lot of bacteria and other germs on them, so we don't want to transfer that into the food. I always suggest too that you have someone handling the money and the ordering, and then others who are handling the food. And if you separate those tasks, it's a little bit easier, and people may not have to wash their hands as quite as often. All right, during our inspections and during your operation, our biggest concerns are the 5 major risk factors, and these are the risk factors that lead to foodborne illness. These are improper hot and cold holding temperatures, making sure your hot food stays hot and your cold food stays cold, inadequate cooking temperatures, making sure that whatever food product you're making hits the correct temperature in order to kill everything that might be dangerous in it. So like you're going to cook your chicken much hotter than you're going to reheat your hot dogs too. So our event guidelines, we are going to share those with you. If you are downstairs, then there should be copies in English and Spanish. We will put them into our chat so you can grab those also. You can always email us at that chfs@pima.gov and we can send you those also. So, and then we go on to contaminated utensils and equipment. So that can be a difficult thing at a temporary event. How are you going to wash, rinse, and sanitize all of your equipment and your utensils? There's a couple of ways to go about that. You can have a 3-bin setup. It's where you have 3 plastic tubs. One is set up for washing, one is set up for rinsing, and then the last one is set up for sanitizing. You would also need a space to air dry your equipment. So you can have that all with you, and it is encouraged to have it in case you need it. Another thing that we suggest is having extra utensils on hand, and it would be good to have more than you think you need. So if you drop something, you're not going to be able to use it, and so you want to be able to grab another one for that use. So have extra utensils and equipment on hand and keep them in a safe place where they're not getting contaminated so that you have them handy when needed. Poor employee health and hygiene. This has to do with making sure you're washing your hands when you should, making sure your clothing is clean, making sure your hair is pulled back and tied up so it doesn't get into the food. And it also has to do with making sure you're not sick when operating. There are definitely viruses and bacteria and different things that are transferred from the person through the food to another person, and you just don't want that to happen. So let's make sure that we are not operating. If you are sick, please find someone else to take your place. And then food from unsafe sources, and we're going to go over that a little bit on the next slide and explain what an unsafe or safe source might actually be. All right, the food you are serving at an event needs to come from an approved source. What does that mean? So you can get your food from a grocery store. You can have, sometimes they have other restaurants make it, and then they serve the food at the event. So the restaurant is making it, you're picking it up, and then you're serving it from your booth. A commissary or commercial kitchen. So those who are operating at temporary food booths, you do not want that food made at home. You do want it made in a commercial kitchen. It does not have to be specifically a commissary, but it does need to be a permitted food facility. So there are some churches that have permitted kitchens. You may have a friend who owns a restaurant. There's lots of different places that you might go. But that food does need to be prepared beforehand at a commissary if you're going to prepare it beforehand. The other option is to prepare on site. There's some foods you can't really prepare on site, which is where you need that commercial kitchen. But if you can prepare it all on site, great. Pick up your groceries, bring it all. Just make sure when you are transporting your food that you are keeping it at the correct temperature. Anything cold, make sure you have your ice chest with you, lots of ice in it. You get it from the grocery store, you put it in the ice, and then you bring it. Same thing, if you're getting food from a restaurant and it needs to stay hot, have an extra ice chest on hand with no ice, and then you're going to put that food in there, and it's going to help keep it hot during your transportation. It works like a hot box. So we're going to keep our hot foods hot and our cold foods cold, even during that transportation. So I have a little asterisk here on food made at home. That's the majority. There are a few small exemptions, and we will get to those on a future slide. All right, there is only one way to really accurately measure the temperatures of your food, and that is by having a probe-like thermometer. So there's a few examples on here. You want to be able to put that probe into your food and check that internal temperature. Oral or fever thermometers are not going to work. They're not going to give you that internal temperature that you need. So when we do the inspection, we also use a probe thermometer, and we keep alcohol swabs on hand so that way we can clean it in between so we're not contaminating any different foods. And you could do the same thing. But those thermometers are going to be really important. Or you just have multiple thermometers and each food gets its own thermometer, however you want to handle that. Just making sure we're not cross-contaminating anything. The critical temperatures here kind of shows you, and if you look up our event guidelines later, then those temperatures are in there also. And those are how hot a food needs to be cooked in order to safely kill whatever might be in there. And then our hot foods, holding our hot foods, we want to keep them 135 degrees and above. Holding our cold foods, we want to keep them 41 degrees or less. All right, excuse me, hand washing. All right, this is the most common hand washing used at our temporary events. Your temporary and seasonal permits are going to need this. Like I mentioned before, your annual concessionaire's permit would need a specialized hand sink. But for you, those of you doing temporaries and seasonals, you would have that 5-gallon container with a continuous flow spigot. So when you turn it on, it just flows and you can wash your hands without touching anything. You can use the soap, you can use the paper towels, and you can use the paper towels to turn it off. And then you have that discard bucket to collect all the water because we do not want to contaminate the area that we're in. We do not want it running into the ground, causing other problems. Like I said before, hand sanitizer is not a substitution for hand washing. You need to actually wash those hands. And you're going to wash between handling raw food and cooked food. You're going to wash after completing tasks. So if you have to take off the trash, wash your hands before you begin working with that food again. If your gloves get dirty or if they become torn, you're going to take them off, wash your hands, put on a new set of gloves. In Arizona, it can get hot and sweaty. Oftentimes, if you're getting too hot and too sweaty, then maybe you should be taking off your gloves, wash your hands, and then put on a new pair of clean gloves. And then when switching jobs or tasks, that's kind of what I was hinting at before. Maybe have someone handling the orders and the phones or whatever you're touching to order, and then others who are doing the actual food handling. Or you're just going to have to wash your hands an awful lot. You'll be taking your gloves off, washing them in between every different test that you do. And then it's also suggested using tools such as tongs or wax paper, different types of things that you can handle that food safely in order to put it in its container and serve it. The annual sink, I will get to that a little bit more too. A specialized hand sink is needed for that because they do not receive as many inspections as a temporary or a seasonal, and the specialized hand sink is there to ensure that they are going to have enough water for their operation and that their operation is going to be a little bit safer. So that it just helps to make sure food safety is just one step above this gravity flow, and it helps with that process. All right, booths and tent structures. You're going to need at least an overhead covering. That overhead covering is going to protect you from the elements, birds flying over. You don't want things to accidentally get in your food. Um, Arizona weather, for the most part, this area, we have really nice weather for a big part of the year. So floors, walls, and screens, they need to be on hand in case they are needed. But for the most part, you're going to need that overhead covering. If it starts raining and it's getting muddy, you're going to need to put a flooring down of some sort, a tarp, however you want to do that flooring. Um, Sometimes the wind gets blowing and it kicks up a lot of dust and dirt. So then you would want those walls or the screens to keep that dirt from getting into your food. And then the flooring actually assists with that also, keeps the dust from flying up into your food. So you need that overhead protection. Now, if you have a grill, you do not want it under this canopy. Fire would have an issue with that. So you would have your grill set up just outside of that. And then all of your food prep, preparing your food to go on the grill or preparing your food to put in the containers, everything, all of that would be done under your structure. And back to that annual event concessionaires. Um, on the left, you can kind of see there's many types of pressurized hand sinks, but the annual concessionaires that permit does need a pressurized hand sink, minimum 5 gallons of fresh water, 15% greater wastewater, and then that water has to also reach 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's the the extra that it needs. We strongly encourage a commercial style um, hand sink. We do have some annual event concessionaire permit holders that actually use a food truck or a food trailer. Something to keep in mind, it is not a mobile food unit permit. The annual concessionaire permit is only good for events, and that's how it's permitted. So that's why we're going to speak about food truck and mobile food unit permits later in this presentation. No double dipping. This has to go with public self-service. Not allowed. So employees and volunteers need to be the ones that are serving those samples. And that's just because you never know where someone else's hands have been. You do not know if they've been sick. There's a lot of unknown variables. There's a lot of ways that the food could then become contaminated. So if you, whatever food you are serving, even if it's samples, that needs to be provided through the employees and the volunteers. Sometimes they do put it on like napkins or a little plate and place it out, and then the person may grab that. They just can't handle the actual food themselves. Time as a control. For many years, we did not allow time as a control at events. It is now allowed, especially since a lot of our events tend to be 4 hours and less. Not all, but many. And so you can use time as a control. There are some things that are hard to keep at the correct temperature. That's understood. If you are going to use time as a control, however, you need to have the paperwork filled out before you start. So you are going to have the information. You're going to list the food that is going to be used under time. You're going to show how you're going to keep track of that time. Sometimes it's a timer. Sometimes you're going to write it down. How are you going to do that? We need to know. And then you're going to say when it needs to be discarded. Then you have your time control log, which is important for this process also. So as soon as you take that food out of the temperature, whether it's the hot or the cold, it needs to start at that original temperature of 135 and above or 41 or less. It needs to start there. You will write it down, and then you're going to write that discard time, and then you're going to actually say when you discard it and initial it. So you can use time as a control. Just keep in mind you do need to keep those logs. You do need that paperwork. If we show up and you're just saying, I'm using time, then we're going to be asking a lot of questions. When was this prepared? When did you take it out of temperature? And then we're going to hand you these documents and have you fill it out before you can continue working. These logs are extremely important for food safety and making sure that those, if the food does not stay in temperatures the way they are supposed to, then they are discarded at the time they are supposed to. And food may only be left out of temperature for that 4 hours. All right, we have this handy dandy checklist, and this is part of our temporary food guidelines that you can look at. This is just an easy checklist to make sure you have everything you need for your event. And it just goes through all of those to remind you to make sure you take everything that you need. You can also find this at pima.gov/health. You're going to look for consumer health and food safety. Again, it's under permitting and inspections, and then business resources and guidelines. So those are there for you if you need them. And strongly encourage that you use it. It's a great tool. We do now also have this in Spanish. So I will get the Spanish version put up onto our website. It's not quite there yet. We just got them. But if you need it in Spanish, please reach out. Do you want to put that in chat? Okay, thank you. All right, like I said, so you are going to apply for that permit. We are going to let you know we're ready to collect payment. You're going to pay for that permit. And then your first day of operation, we are going to come do your inspection. Once you have passed your inspection, you will receive a permit just like this. Usually it's green. Ever so often it shows up in a different color, but most likely it'll be green. And that needs to be posted in a place where the public can see it, but also where if my team is walking by, they can see it. So then they know they don't have to stop and bother you because you have your permit and you have it posted just as you're supposed to. So make sure they are extra sticky. So I suggest having tape on hand to either tape it or just use the very top little sticky part, because once you stick it to something, it's never coming off. So just keep that in mind. Event coordinators. So in Pima County Code, it does state that if you have one or more food booths, then you need to have an event coordinator. We usually state if you have 5 or more food vendors. That's where we really insist that you have an event coordinator. An event coordinator is someone who is going to ensure that the event is running smoothly, that everybody has everything they need, that everybody has the guidelines, they're following the rules, they've applied for those permits. It's the event coordinator who needs to ensure that all vendors apply. And if an event coordinator is needed, we ask that those are submitted 30 days prior to an event. We want those event coordinator permits first, and then we want you to make sure all of your vendors apply for their temporary food permits. The event coordinator does not have to be the person running the event. I guess I said market, but really whatever event it is, it doesn't have to be the main person in charge. It's just whoever wants to take charge to ensure food safety. So someone that we can work with and that you can work with, that we can all make sure that the event runs a little bit more smoothly. All right. So this goes along with the event a little bit. So if you have any questions, this might kind of answer those. But if you do have questions, feel free to put those in chat. And when I get a chance, I will answer those questions. We do not have any guidelines on how your tents need to be weighted. I don't know if fire has something for that, but for us, it just has to be there. But no, if it's windy, you don't want it to fly away. So it would be a good idea to have some weight on those to make sure it doesn't fly away on you. We have a lot of farmers out there, and there is an agricultural exemption for some foods. The foods are described here. If you own your own farm and you're, especially with farmers markets, you go to the farmers market, you're selling your product. It could be plants, it could be beef, swine, fowl, eggs, milk, lamb, animal feed. All of those items are covered under the Department of Agriculture. They're the ones that provide your inspections, and we do not intervene unless you are turning some of those products into other foods. You want to make a salad to serve instead of just having your produce. You want to make a coleslaw or whatever it is. You want to use your meat and make carne asada. I don't know. Whatever it is. So we would never charge you for that. But if you are going to turn your agricultural product into a food to be served, you do need a temporary permit for that, temporary or seasonal or annual. There is no charge for those agricultural farms. That's part of the exemption. So you can serve them, but you are subject to inspection by lawful authority. That lawful authority would be us. So you do need that temporary permit. You do need to apply for it. Just on your application, please let us know that you are a farm. And that'll help us know how to process it correctly. Cottage food. Some of you may be aware that recently the governor signed a bill expanding our cottage food program. Many people are calling it the tamale bill. I will get to that expansion in a moment, but just know for this time frame into effect. So the current cottage food allows individuals to make homemade products that are neitherly potentially hazardous nor time or temperature controlled. So really what's allowed within those cottage food right now are mainly cakes, cookies, baked goods, jams, jellies, honey, those types of things. If you are wanting to follow the cottage food, you are required to apply on the Arizona Department of Health Services website and receive a certification from them. They will require you to have a food handler certification from an accredited program. And again, that's why we are offering that. That's the exact program that I mentioned at the beginning that you can have. And then all cottage food items have to be pre-bagged at home and labeled. And this is everything that needs to be on that label. You need to have the name of it, the name of your cottage food company, the ingredients that are in it, and then you have to have that disclaimer. That disclaimer says this product was produced in a home kitchen that may process common food allergens and is not subject to public health inspection. So, and then you also have to have the date that it was produced. So all of that, the cottage food, it all has to be labeled with all of that, has to be prepackaged if you're going to serve those. These are items that for now are approved and not approved. So your approved things are anything that's not potentially hazardous and does not require temperature control. So the right columns, so it's like every other. You have an approved column and not approved column, an approved column and a not approved column. So just keep in mind that is the current cottage food while we are waiting for ADHS. And these are the updates. It was House Bill 2042, often called the tamale bill. Really all that is an update to our cottage food program. It was signed by the governor on March 29th of this year, and it goes into effect 90 days after the end of the current legislative session. We were given notice that that will be right about September 14th. It is going to expand those foods allowed. Currently, we do not know what foods exactly. You can read the bill and it kind of tells you, but there's a lot that the Arizona Department of Health Services are going to let us know what's allowed and what's not. They are in the process of writing those rules and regulations, and they will put it on their website once it goes into effect. And you can look at their website. It's ADHS Cottage Food Program. And if you keep an eye on their website, it's in the chat if you want to follow that link. But that's where you can find the updates. And until those updates are on that website, it has not gone into effect. So for now, it's unchanged. Very soon, most likely next month, middle of the month, that's when the new things will be coming up. All right, so I wanted to take a pause here. Are there any questions? Is there anything you need to put into chat? Anything you would like answered about temporary food, farmers markets, cottage food before I move on to mobile? I hope so. So the question is, will we ever be able to pay online? Unfortunately, our program online that we use does not work with that yet. We are in the process of trying to get online payments. I'm afraid it's still going to be a while. This is a quiet group. Do we have any other questions? I'm happy to answer whatever I can. English or Spanish. All right, so I am going to move on to mobile food units, and for the next little while, I am not going to be looking at the chat feature. I will get back to the chat when we get to the end of our mobile food units, but it's just easier, I think, for you and for me if we stick with the subject that we're on. So feel free to put those questions in there, but let's move on to mobile food units. Regulations for mobile food units. Also, just like the temporary, we use the 2013 FDA Food Code. There is also a Pima County code for our mobile food units. And along with that, there is an Arizona Administrative Code Title IX. The state of Arizona came up with a universal food code for mobile food units, and it was either 2020 or 2021, so that the whole state of Arizona could have similar guidelines. Well, same guidelines. And so we have a lot of food trucks. Food trucks are mobile, right? They go from one place to another. We have a lot of people who come from Maricopa County, Pinal County, Cochise County, even some of our more northern counties. They sometimes come here to operate. So we have this universal code that helps with that. Along with that, each county has their own permits. So if you are moving from one county to another, you still need to get the other county's permit. If you have a permit from your original county, we have reciprocal permits. We will ask to see your permit along with a few other things, and then you would obtain and pay for a permit within our county. But the nice thing is those universal codes, we're all operating under the same code. Just know, so food trucks, the nice thing about food trucks, so the temporary, the seasonal, and the annual, they're limited on where they can operate. They can only operate those events. The nice thing about your mobile food units is you can operate wherever and whenever you choose, as long as you're within the county. So even the administrative code says that we cannot dictate what time you're going to be serving your food. You want to serve food at 2 in the morning? Be my guest. But something to keep in mind is a lot of our cities and towns within the county may also require a permit. Business license there, sometimes they require certain things. So just make sure wherever you're serving that you have all the permits that you need to actually operate there. All right, we're going to start off with our Class 1 mobile food units. These units are inspected once a year. They only offer prepackaged food. So they'll have candy, chips, ice cream, but not like your soft serve. Soft serve would not be a type 1. The Class 1 has those prepackaged ice creams. Sometimes we also have trucks that serve frozen meats or seafood. And as long as they are prepackaged, frozen, labeled, so you know where they came from, then you can do those off of a type 1 mobile food unit. Sometimes these are push carts, sometimes they're vehicles, sometimes they're trailers. They look like a lot of different things. Their menu is restricted to prepackaged food. There is no open food, no preparation is taking place. Everything is prepackaged. The difference is that sometimes it's held cold. And then we move on to our Class 2 mobile food units. These mobile food units are inspected twice a year. Their menus are restricted to things such as reheating, hot holding, and cold holding ready-to-eat foods. The only raw animal product which is going to be allowed on a Class 2 mobile unit would be your bacon-wrapped hot dogs. Now, just keep in mind, those bacon-wrapped hot dogs do need to be pre-wrapped at the commissary. That is in that state mobile code, Title IX, and so that's a requirement. You wrap your hot bacon around your hot dogs at your commissary. You put everything ready to go on your truck, and then you would make sure that the raw animal product is separated from any of your other foods. A Class 2 mobile food unit is also required to have a commissary or servicing area agreement, which is updated yearly. I'm going to get into that a little bit more on a future slide, but it is required. And then we have our Class 3 mobile food units. These are inspected 3 times a year. They have a more complex food preparation. They are restricted by the equipment and capacity that they have. You wouldn't want to serve a menu like the Cheesecake Factory or Texas Roadhouse. That would just be too much to handle on a food truck. So just keep that in mind. You have limited space available. You have limited equipment available. You are also going to be limited on what you're doing on the truck. You're limited to cooking, reheating, and assembling ingredients. And all of that needs to have been pre-prepared at a commissary. Something to keep in mind, we call it cooling. Some of you may know what that is. Cooling of food is where sometimes it's produce. You're dicing up tomatoes. You need to put it in the refrigerator to cool it before you put it in the truck. Or it can be something a little more complex. You're making carne asada or any other product. You're cooking it. It's nice and hot. You are then cooling it in your walk-in or large refrigerator at your commissary. And once it's cooled, you're then putting it on your truck to reheat and serve. You may, on a type 3, have raw animal product. So then that would really, you're cooking it and you're holding it hot, or you're cooking it and you're serving it. Some different questions we get are how you hold certain things hot, especially like hamburgers. You don't want them to dry out. A nice thing to do about that is you cook the hamburgers, you throw them into a metal container in water to keep them hot on the griddle, and then just before service, you're going to brown them on the griddle and then serve them. So there's lots of different ways that you can hold things hot. to ensure that food safety. Again, they are required to have a commissary or servicing area agreement, and those are updated yearly. All right, we're going to move on to permit renewal inspections. So every mobile food unit, whether it's a class 1, 2, or 3, everyone has to go through a once a year permit renewal inspection. So if you own a class 1, that's your inspection for the year. If you own a 2 or a 3, you're going to have one permit renewal before you're allowed to renew your permit. And then the other 1 or 2 inspections will be a food safety inspection in the field. So these permit renewal inspections are scheduled and they are here at our health department location. Once in a while, we can meet at the commissary. Those are very limited. And our new location is being built and we're hoping for the beginning of next year. Once that is done, absolutely every truck will have to come to us because we will have everything needed to provide those inspections. So we only do those inspections at our location and once in a while at a commissary. We will not provide those inspections anywhere else. So items required for your inspection, if you show up without any of these or one of these items, you will not pass your inspection. I see a hand raised. Go ahead and put that question into our chat and I will get to you in a moment. So if you are coming for your permit renewal, you will be asked for your commissary agreement. And remember, that's renewed every year. So every year we need to see a new commissary agreement. You will be expected to have hot water. Your hand washing sink needs to be 100 degrees or greater. Your 3-compartment sink needs to be at least 110 degrees or greater. Your cooling units, those are actually not cooling units, those are your refrigeration units. Any type of refrigeration units you have need to be 41 or less. You will not receive a new permit if you cannot meet those requirements. And then also ensure your wastewater is draining correctly and not leaking. Food trucks, sometimes there's a difficulty, you might hit a curb. There's lots of different things that can happen. If that wastewater is disrupted or if your pipes are leaking for any reason, you will be asked to fix those before renewing your permit. And then some things that we like to remind you to bring with you. Sometimes you'll do a deep cleaning before your annual inspection, which is a great thing. Love it. Do that. And but make sure you put your equipment back on. So you'll want your thermometers, you'll want your food safety manager certificate, you'll want your permits hung up in your truck, you want your food handler cards so that we can see them, you want your sanitizer test strips. Actually, you'd want your commissary logs with you also. Those are now, because with the state code, you need to have your commissary records on your truck. So that just shows us when you've been visiting your commissary and how often you're returning. This is what our current commissary servicing area agreement looks like. And you would be choosing which type you are, the information for your facility, and then please, please, please make sure that the middle section is being filled out. What services do you receive from your commissary? We need to know. Some commissaries have more services than others. And then some trucks need more services than others. So we need to know what services you are getting. So once you have it all filled out, then you can get it signed by the owner of that commissary or owner or operator. And that does have to be signed by them. And so they're just ensuring, yes, you are using their commissary. Yes, you have a contract with them. Like I said before, new form is submitted to us every year. Routine inspections. So these would be for our class 2s and our class 3s. So you'll be receiving 1 or 2 of these along with your permit renewal. These are not scheduled. We're just going to pop up and say, hey, we're ready for your inspection. And we need to be able to do these while you are operating. We can't wait till you're finished, because a big part of this inspection is to ensure safe food handling. We're checking to make sure you're washing your hands. We're checking to make sure you're handling that food safely. And just know these might occur during very busy times. We understand you're busy. We try to be mindful of that. We try to get in and get out, but just know there are some things that we are going to need you to correct before we finish. So the sooner those items are corrected, then the sooner we'll be out of your truck and out of your way. And so this is a great time for education. We will do the inspection, and then we will slip off the truck and write up your report, and then we will come back and go over it quickly with you and get your signature. Something I like to encourage all food trucks is extra ice. Your equipment needs to be working correctly, but it's always a good idea to have extra ice chests with ice on hand. It is hot here, especially in the summer, but even sometimes in the winter. And when you get the equipment going in your trucks, it gets even hotter, and that equipment just really struggles. It can't keep up with what you're doing. So keep that extra ice on hand. You can even put some extra ice into your equipment to help the equipment stay cooler. Like I said, though, this ice is not a substitute for your equipment. You still need your equipment running the best that it can. It's just to assist you to be able to keep your food at the proper temperatures. All right, some more requirements. So code states you need to be visiting your commissary every 72 to 96 hours. Pima County code right now actually states every 24 hours. State code says every 96 hours. You just need to make sure you're getting there often enough that you can do everything you need to. You're filling up your potable water, you're dumping your wastewater. You're not supposed to hold food from one day to another. You should have fresh food every day. So sometimes you might be visiting your commissary every day or before every time you operate. Um, and remember, even with our threes, your food preparation should be limited on the truck. We don't want that cooling. We want that done at the commissary. Just simple things on the truck to keep things easier and so that your equipment is working correctly. And then this might seem like a silly thing to say, but your mobile unit needs to stay and keep the ability to be mobile. We have had some in the past who've tried to build around it, or you built shade structures, whatever. Just remember, in order to have a mobile food permit, that is one of the things you have to continue to be mobile. And along with that, you may not be directly connected to potable or wastewater lines. You're going to hook up and then fill your tank and then disconnect. To drain your wastewater, you're going to hook up, you're going to drain it, and then you're going to disconnect and shut the valve. So no direct connections. You're going to make sure that, again, that wastewater is completely contained. It's not dripping along the way. And please make sure that you are dumping at either your servicing area or your commissary. I know some often think, well, it's just hand washing water. Wastewater on a food truck is considered black water that needs to be disposed of correctly and safely, which means you are disposing at your servicing area or at your commissary. And then remember to have enough potable water for your business. If you run out of water, you've got to shut down until you can get more fresh water. You cannot operate without water. And then a reminder, once again, keep those hot foods hot and those cold foods cold. So that was all about our routine inspections. That's kind of what you can expect when we show up to do your inspection. I've mentioned quite a bit about commissaries. I wanted to explain a little bit about commissaries for those of you who may not be completely aware what they are. They are permitted kitchens. They are required to have a commissary permit. That means they have space for the tenants. That's where you're going to do the bulk of your food preparation. A lot of your stuff on your truck is going to be reheating and serving, but a lot of the preparation beforehand happens at that commissary. A lot of different types of facilities can use a commissary. It's our mobile food units, our limited food manufacturers, our caterers, our temporary seasonal annual food establishments. There's a picture on there that's kind of what some commissaries look like. They might all look a little bit different. If you personally own a restaurant and then you want to have a food truck, they will not have to have a commissary permit. But if you're then wanting to let in a cousin, a brother, a friend, then you have to obtain that commissary permit before another food truck or caterer or whoever joins you. I guess not caterer, but if you want any other food trucks to join you, then you're going to have that commissary permit. Those commissary permits, like if you're the owner, your name has to be on the restaurant and the truck unless they have that commissary permit that allows for someone else. These are some of the things that are done at a commissary. There's other things that you might do at your commissary. Some trucks have a 3-compartment sink on them, but they do tend to be smaller, so they may not fit all of your equipment. Some do not have a 3-compartment sink at all, so then you would use the commissary's 3-compartment sink. All of your food, your cold and dry storage at the commissary needs to be labeled. The shelves that are holding all your stuff needs to be labeled with your name so it's not mixed up with anybody else's. This is where they have the food preparation sink where you can wash your fruits and vegetables, prepare your food ahead of time. Food prep areas, you can cook, you can chop, you can do all those different things. And then oftentimes this is where you also have your potable fill. So you're filling your fresh water, you're dumping your wastewater. They have those connections outside that are easy to get to and protected from the environment. So that's what I have. We are going to open up that chat. I'm going to take a look at questions. And if you have any other questions, oh, look at that. Someone already answered the question. So that's exactly our new location being built is going to be on Miracle Mile. It's where the Golden Pen Lanes bowling alley used to be. It's right next to the police department that's right there also. So we're excited about our new location. They're putting in a shade structure. They're going to make the electrical connections better so that we can accommodate whatever electrical connections you have. But we're excited for that. But for the meantime, you're going to come visit us here at the Abrams Health Department. Any other questions? We are going to leave this chat open until the 3 p.m. cutoff in case you have questions. Feel free to put them in there. Any other questions you have, feel free to send an email at chfs@pima.gov. It's right there in the chat. And we can get back to you as soon as we can with more detailed answers. Also, if there's Spanish questions, I'm going to scroll down. This meeting is being recorded. We are going to place this up on our website. It might take a couple of days to get it up there, but it will be available for anyone who wants to watch it. You're welcome. I'm glad you could make it. And yeah, hopefully we can answer some of those questions. If you go back and if you weren't here at the beginning, you go back and you listen to it. If you then have those questions, feel free to email. All right. Well, I am going to wrap things up here then. Like I said, if you have questions, you can put them here in chat. You can send an email. We will leave this open until 3 o'clock, but I'm glad that all of you were able to come today. I hope you learned something. Um, yeah, it's a great community. I love working with each of you. So looking forward to the future, and feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. Good question. We are just going to post one video at this point in time. I do not know which video that is going to be, but we are going to collect all of the questions from this morning session and all the questions from this afternoon's, and we will put together those answers. If you provide us with your contact information, we'll be sure to get that to you. I'm not sure if we're going to put FAQs on our website or how we're going to go about that, but you will be able to have the information that was provided. Thank you.